I told him I had never loved him on a Tuesday in March, in the long gallery at Ardent Hall, with the rain beating against the tall windows and a fire I had not asked for burning in the grate at my back. I had rehearsed the words for 9 days. I had said them aloud to my own reflection in the mirror above my dressing table, until my mouth no longer trembled around them. I had chosen the gallery because it was public enough to keep him from saying anything ruinous, and private enough that no servant would overhear and carry the story to London by Friday. He stood with his back to the rain, hands clasped behind him, the burned left hand bare for once, because he had been writing letters when I asked him for 10 minutes of his time. The scar along his jaw caught the firelight when he turned to look at me. I made myself meet his eyes, dark hazel, the colour of cold tea, and I said the sentence I had built like a wall to keep him on the other side of.
I never loved you, I said. I owe it to you to tell you so. Whatever you believed of me at the fire, whatever you have believed since, none of it was love. I let you carry me here because I had nowhere else to go, and I let you keep me because it cost me less than the alternative. But I never loved you, Your Grace. I think you should know it before the bishop comes on Thursday. The words came out cleaner than I had expected. I had built each one a separate cage in my chest. I let them out one at a time so they would not crowd at the door and break. I waited for him to turn cold. I waited for the careful, terrible courtesy he used when he was preparing to dismantle someone in public. I had seen him do it to a viscount at a hunt breakfast in October. 3 sentences, and the man had left before the meat course. I waited for him to do it to me. The Duke of Ardent looked at me for a long moment, the rain rattling behind him, and then he smiled. It was not the smile I had seen at dinners. It was not the small, tight one he gave to fools and bishops. It was a smile I had not seen on his face in the 8 months I had lived under his roof. And it broke something in me before he had even spoken. I know, he said. I felt the floor shift. I know, he said again, more gently, as if I were a horse that had not been told yet that the storm was over. I have always known. I was the one who fell, Caroline. You did not. I fell in love with you anyway. He said it the way another man might say the post has come, or the south field is flooded, as a plain piece of news, already settled, already paid for. I had brought my hands together at my waist to keep them still. They came apart now, and I could not put them back. I felt the blood leave my face and then return all at once, hot at the throat, hotter behind the eyes. You knew, I said.
My voice did not behave.
All of it. From when? From the fire, said the Duke. From before the fire. From a great deal earlier than the fire. I did not mean to say so today. I had thought I would wait until after the wedding, when you could not run from me in any direction that mattered. But you have done me the courtesy of speaking first, and I find I cannot be a coward when you have been brave. I sat down. I did not mean to. There was a chair behind me, and my knees decided. Tell me, I said. Tell me when. Tell me how. Tell me everything, because I do not understand what I have been living inside of. He came across the gallery to me. He moved as if he were not certain he was allowed any nearer, which was a thing I had never seen him be uncertain about before. He stopped 2 paces from my chair. He did not sit. He looked at the rain instead of at me. And he began. It was not the night of the fire, he said. It was 3 years earlier. You will not remember. I remember every part of it. I had better start there. I want to tell you what he told me, I want to tell you what he saw and what he chose and what I never let myself see. Because for 9 days I had been certain I was rejecting a man who had only ever pitied me. And in the space of 1 minute, he had made me understand that I was the one who had been blind. I will tell it the way he told it, backward, from the rain in the gallery, all the way back to the first time he saw me, on a road in Surrey in the summer of 1813, when I was 18 and he was 30, and neither of us knew that the other one existed. 3 weeks before the rain in the gallery, on a clear evening in late February, the Duke of Ardent had asked me to dine with him alone in the small parlour at the east end of the house. Aunt Augusta had a head cold. Lord Henry was in town.
The footman withdrew after the second course at his nod, and we were left with the candles and the soup, and the kind of silence that had been between us for months. Careful, dense, not unfriendly. He set down his spoon. He had set down his spoon a great many times in my company, but this time he laid it parallel to the bowl, with the deliberation of a man placing a chess piece. "My solicitor came down from London on Tuesday," he said. "He brought the marriage settlement. I have signed my portion. The bishop has written to confirm Thursday the 14th of March. If you wish to alter any term, the time to say so is now." I had known this was coming. I had known it for 8 months, since the night he carried me out of the burning kitchen at Briar Hollow, with my stepmother screaming behind us, and Sebastian Whitcomb shouting for the magistrate. And the Duke's coachman had taken us at a hard pace north until the smoke was no longer visible behind the carriage. I had known it in some form ever since I had woken in a bed at Ardent Hall, with the housekeeper sitting beside me and a burn on my forearm dressed in clean linen, and a pearl-faced woman I did not yet know, Aunt Augusta, telling me without ceremony that I was to consider this house mine until further notice, and that no one would be permitted to remove me from it. I had known it most clearly 3 weeks before the parlour dinner. The Duke had been in the library, his back to me, his hand resting flat on a book he was not reading. He had said, "I will not have you used as a weapon against me by every gossip in 3 counties. Marry me, and they will have nothing to throw." I had said yes that day. I had said yes because I had nowhere else to go, and because the alternative was returning to Briar Hollow and Sebastian, and because the Duke had asked it of me with the particular tonelessness of a man performing a duty. I had told myself it was a transaction. I had told myself he wanted it no more than I did. I had told myself the kindest thing I could do was take the offer cleanly and not pretend ever to a feeling neither of us had. In the small parlour, with the soup growing cold, I said, "There is nothing I wish to alter." "Good," said the Duke. He picked up his spoon. He did not eat with it. He turned it in his fingers and watched the candlelight slide along its edge. "Caroline," he said. It was the first time he had used my given name aloud, in private, without any other person in the room. He had said Miss Ashby 1,000 times. He had said my ward to his solicitor, and my intended to the bishop, and the young lady in my keeping to a magistrate in October. He had not said Caroline. It hit me the way the master prompt warned me a first name should hit. Like a thunderclap, low in the chest, with the rain still inaudible outside. I did not look up from my bowl. "Yes, Your Grace," I said, and I heard my own voice be smaller than I had meant it to be. He did not say anything else. He set the spoon down. He picked up his wine. He did not drink it. After a while he said, in a tone I had never heard from him, "I beg your pardon.
I should not have. You may call me whatever you wish, I said, too quickly. We are to be married in 17 days. That is not the reason a man calls a woman by her name, said the Duke, very quietly. And he rose from the table and bowed to me. And he left me with the cooling soup and a candle that had begun to gutter. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my window and watched the moon go down over the elm walk, and I thought, he did not mean it. He cannot have meant it. He has been kind and he has been honourable, and he has saved my life. And if I let myself believe for 1 minute that there was anything in his voice tonight other than habit, I will not survive what comes next. 9 days later, I walked into the gallery and told him I had never loved him. Now do you see why I had to? He told me, in the gallery, that he had seen me first on the Reading Road in July of 1813. I had been 18. My father had still been alive. We had been driving back from a visit to my aunt in Wiltshire, my father and I, in a hired chaise because our own carriage had a cracked axle. The chaise had thrown a wheel a mile short of an inn. My father had walked ahead to summon help, and I had sat on my trunk in the road in a yellow muslin gown that was too thin for the wind, with my hair coming loose at the temples the way it always did, and I had sung to the horse to keep it calm, because the postboy had run after my father. A travelling carriage had come around the bend. The Duke had been inside it. He had ordered his coachman to stop. He had not left the carriage. It would not have been proper. He was a stranger, and I a young woman alone. But he had sent his groom with a flask of cordial and a folded carriage rug, and a message that the gentleman in the carriage begged Miss to keep the rug against the wind until her father returned, and that he would send word ahead to the inn that a chaise required assistance a mile back. I had taken the rug. I had drunk a swallow of the cordial. I had given the rug back to the groom with my thanks. I had not looked into the carriage, and I had not asked the gentleman's name. My father had returned. The chaise had been mended. We had gone on. I did not remember any of it. I had not thought of that afternoon once in 3 years. The Duke remembered every part of it. He told it to me in the gallery, with the rain easing and the fire dying low, and his eyes not on my face, but on the rug across the back of my chair. A different rug, but he would not have known that. And he said, "You sang to the horse. You did not know I could hear you." It was a Welsh tune. I had heard it once before, at a wedding in Carmarthen, when I was 20, and I had forgotten it until you sang it. You sang 2 verses through, and then you began the third, and you did not know the words, and you laughed at yourself. I sat in that carriage for the length of 3 verses, and I could not bring myself to drive on. My groom came back. We drove on. I asked at the inn for the name of the gentleman whose chaise had broken down. They told me, Ashby of Briar Hollow, Surrey, with his daughter. I wrote it on the back of a letter, and I put the letter in a drawer in my study. And I told myself I had been moved by a trick of the wind, and I did not look at the letter again for 3 years. He looked at me then. I looked at it the morning my solicitor wrote to me about your father's death, he said. He had written to me because Edmund Ashby's will named me as a possible trustee. Your father had been at school with my late uncle, and the lawyers had cast a wide net for someone honourable to oversee a small, unentailed estate, with a young heiress and a stepmother of dubious character. The letter from my solicitor sat on my desk for 2 days. I knew the name. I went and found the other letter in the drawer. I read it. I said yes to the trust the same afternoon. I told myself it was a duty owed to a dead schoolfellow of my uncle's. I knew it was not. I did not know yet what it was. I knew only that I had remembered a Welsh tune for 3 years, and I would not be the man who let an 18-year-old girl who sang to horses on the Reading Road be buried in some country marriage to a creditor. I could not speak. I sat in my chair with my hands in my lap, and I felt my face burn, and I thought, he saw me. He saw me before I knew there was anyone there to see. I made myself say, "You never told me. In all the months, you never told me you had seen me before." "No," said the Duke. "I knew you did not remember. I would not use what you had not given me." He told me about the night of the fire, which was the night I had thought was the beginning, and which he wanted me to understand was the middle. I had written to him in early July, 6 weeks after my father's funeral. I had written because his solicitor had given me his direction and instructed me to apply to him as trustee in any matter that touched the estate. I had written because Sebastian Whitcomb had begun to come to dinner 4 times a week, and because my stepmother had begun to speak of settlements and sensible matches in a voice I had heard her use when she meant to be obeyed, and because I had found Sebastian going through the drawers of my father's desk one afternoon when he believed me to be in the orchard. I had written a careful letter. I had said only that I had concerns regarding the management of small household sums, and that I wished to know the formal procedure for raising such concerns with a trustee. I had not said, "I am afraid." I had not said, "They mean to make me marry him." I had been raised to keep my voice level on paper. The Duke wrote back inside 3 days. His letter said that he would call upon Briar Hollow on the afternoon of the 17th, accompanied by his solicitor, to inspect the household accounts in the ordinary course of his trusteeship, and that I should not be alarmed by the formality of the visit. It was a routine matter. He arrived at 3. I came down the stairs in a grey muslin gown and my second-best slippers, because the first pair had been sent for repair. I had not seen him since my father's funeral, where he had stood at the back of the church and bowed to my stepmother, and not said a word to me. He stood now in the front hall of Briar Hollow, with his greatcoat over his arm, his solicitor behind him, the burned left hand kept by his side, and the dark hazel eyes finding me on the staircase, as if he had been waiting 8 years for me to come down it. He bowed. "Miss Ashby," he said, "forgive the intrusion. I hope I find you well." I curtsied. I said, "I am, Your Grace. Thank you." My stepmother came in from the morning room, jet brooch winking, and I saw her see him properly for the first time, and I saw her recalibrate in the space of one breath from trustee to catastrophe. He stayed for 2 hours. He went through the household books with his solicitor. He asked me, in the presence of my stepmother, 3 questions. Whether I was satisfied with the management of the estate, whether I had any debts I wished to declare, whether I had any concerns of any kind that I wished to raise privately with a trustee, and if so, whether I would prefer to do so now or by letter. He asked the 3rd question while looking at the ledger, in a voice flat enough to suggest it was a printed line on a form. I knew what he was offering me. So did my stepmother. I said, with my mouth very dry, "I have no concerns, Your Grace, that cannot wait." He closed the ledger. He said, "Very good." He bowed to my stepmother. As he passed me on the way to the door, he said, very quietly, and without turning his head, "Write to my secretary, not to me. The address is in the file. He is discreet. Anything you send to him will be brought to me within the day." He was gone before my stepmother had finished arranging her face. I wrote that night. I wrote without ornament. Sebastian Whitcomb intends to compel me to marry him. My stepmother is in his confidence. He has produced a paper bearing what he claims is my father's signature, promising my hand against a sum of £3,000. The signature is not my father's. My stepmother stood at his elbow when he showed it to me. There is talk of other debts that I do not believe exist. I do not know what he will do if I refuse him publicly. I am afraid of what he will do if I refuse him privately. Caroline Ashby. The Duke's reply came on horseback, by his own groom, on the second morning.
Miss Ashby, I will be on the Bracton Road on the night of the 20th, with a carriage. If you can come out, come. If you cannot, send word and I will come in. A. I did not know, then, that he had been sleeping in his clothes in a roadside inn within 10 miles of Briar Hollow for 2 nights, waiting for any letter at all. The fire was on the night of the 20th. It was not an accident. Sebastian had been drinking in the kitchen with 2 of his friends from town, a thin one with a broken nose, and a heavier one already half asleep against the dresser. I came down the back stairs in my travelling cloak, with the brass hairpins still in my hair, and my mother's locket and the bundle of her letters folded inside the cloak against my ribs, because my stepmother had threatened twice to burn them, and I did not trust her not to. I had meant to slip out by the kitchen door, because the front would have been heard. Sebastian was in the kitchen. He stood up when he saw me. He said, in the soft, pleased voice he used when he believed himself unobserved, "Where are you going, cousin?" I had said, "Out of doors. I am not well." He had said, "In a travelling cloak, with a bundle, at 11 at night. You are not well." He had moved between me and the door. The maid, Polly, 18, red-haired, the only person at Briar Hollow who had ever been kind to me, had been at the hearth banking the fire for the night. She had looked up and seen me, and she had seen Sebastian seeing me, and she had made the smallest nod of her head toward the side door that led out to the kitchen garden. Sebastian had turned at her movement. His friend had laughed. Sebastian had picked up the candle from the table, a tall tallow candle, too tall, half burned. And Sebastian had said, "A girl who runs in the night. What does a girl carry, in a bundle, when she runs in the night, I wonder?" He had taken a step toward me. I had not moved. The candle in his hand had been at the level of the dresser. He had reached for the bundle inside my cloak, and I had stepped back, and his elbow had struck the dresser, and the candle had gone over. It went into the linen press. The linen press had been left open because Polly had been folding sheets. The flame caught the edge of a sheet and ran up it the way fire runs up paper. Polly screamed. Sebastian swore. The thin one ran for the bell. I do not remember running. I remember being in the kitchen garden in the cold air, with my cloak still buttoned and my bundle still pressed to my ribs, and the kitchen window behind me lit up orange. And a man, on a horse, on the lane beyond the wall, was already off his horse and through the gate before I knew that he was the Duke. He saw me. He did not say anything. He took my elbow, the burned hand, ungloved that night, and he steered me toward the lane where the carriage was waiting in the dark with the lamps shuttered. And he put me inside it, and then he turned around and walked back through the kitchen garden toward the burning house. I leaned out of the carriage door and I screamed at him. "What are you doing, Your Grace? What are you doing?" He turned his head. Even in the orange light from the kitchen, even with his face half in shadow, the dark hazel eyes found mine and held. "There is a girl in there," he said. "The maid. I will not leave a girl in there. Stay in the carriage." He went back in. He came out 2 minutes later with Polly over his shoulder and his coat on fire at the cuff.
He put the coat out against the wall of the kitchen garden with his bare hand. He brought Polly to the carriage and laid her on the opposite seat and said to his coachman, "Drive." He climbed in beside me, and he did not look at me.
He said, "Are you hurt?" I said, "No. Polly." "She is breathing," he said. "She has swallowed smoke. We will stop at the first farm with a fire and a blanket." I did not say anything else. I sat in the dark with my mother's letters against my ribs, and I watched his hand bleed a little, where the burn from his coat had reopened the older burn from the stable fire when he was 19. And I thought, he came back for the maid. He came back for the maid because she was in the kitchen. I had not yet understood that he had also come back for the maid because the maid had nodded toward the side door for me, and a man like him does not leave a debt unpaid. In the gallery, 3 weeks before the wedding, he told me what he had thought as he sat across from me in the dark of that carriage. He told me he had thought, "She did not let go of the bundle, not when I took her elbow, not when she screamed at me from the carriage door, not even when she leaned out into the firelight. Whatever is in it is the last thing she has of a mother, and she carried it through her own kitchen on fire, and she will hold it on her lap for 100 miles before she lets a stranger touch it. I will not be the man who asks her to set it down. He did not ask me to set it down." We stopped at a farm. He paid the wife to sit with Polly. He did not look at the bundle. He did not look at my face for very long either, because he had already seen it, and he did not trust himself to keep looking. He told me about the morning after. I had woken at Ardent Hall in a high white bed with a coverlet I did not recognize, and a smell of lavender water, and a small fire in the grate. Aunt Augusta was sitting beside the bed in black silk and pearls, knitting something pale, and she had looked up when my eyes opened and said, in the tone of a woman announcing the weather, "You are at Ardent Hall in Hertfordshire. The Duke brought you in last night. The maid is in the housekeeper's parlour and will recover. Your stepmother and her son have been told that you are under my protection, and that any attempt to remove you will be answered by my nephew personally. You will stay here until the lawyers have done their work, and you will have a companion at all hours, which is myself, because we will not have any nonsense said in 3 counties about a young woman in this house. Do you take tea or chocolate in the morning?" I had said, in a voice that did not feel like mine, "Tea, please." She had nodded. She had not asked me anything else. She had rung the bell, and she had said, when the maid came, "Tea for Miss Ashby, and the housekeeper, if she is at liberty, with the salve for the burn. Quickly, please." I noticed then that the bundle of my mother's letters had been laid carefully on the table beside the bed, untouched, the cloak it had been wrapped in folded beneath. Someone had brought it in for me. Someone had not opened it. I had not seen the Duke for 3 days. He had sent word by his aunt that he was taking depositions from his coachman and from Polly and from the magistrate at Bracton, and that Mr. Whitcomb had been arrested for arson on the deposition of a maid named Polly Ainsworth, and was being held at the assizes, and that I was not to think of any of it for 3 days. On the 4th day, Aunt Augusta had brought me down to the morning room, and the Duke had been there in a clean coat, with the burn on his hand bandaged, and he had said, "Miss Ashby, I beg your pardon for the delay. Are you well enough to hear what has been arranged?" I had said yes. He had said, "Your stepmother is no longer at Briar Hollow. She has retired to her sister's house in Bath, by an arrangement of my solicitor with hers. She will not return to Surrey. Sebastian Whitcomb will be tried in the spring, and will, in my solicitor's judgment, be transported. I have caused the kitchen wing of Briar Hollow to be repaired at my own expense, and the household to be placed under a steward of my choosing, who will hold it in trust against your majority. which I understand to be in 2 months. The estate is yours. The funds are yours. The £4,000 in the funds is intact. Your father's affairs were honourable. There were no debts of any kind. Whatever your stepmother told you is a lie." I had stared at him. He had said, more quietly, "You are not to feel obliged in any way. You are a guest of my aunt, not of mine. You have your own income and your own house. When you are ready, my carriage will take you anywhere in England you wish to go." I had said, "Why are you doing this?" He had not looked away. "Your father was a good man," he had said. "I am the trustee of his daughter's interests. I am doing what the trust requires." It had been the first lie he had told me, and he had told it with his hand bandaged and his eyes steady, and a face so carefully closed that I had believed him. I had stayed. I had told myself I stayed because the alternative was Briar Hollow, with the kitchen smoke-stained, and Polly recovering, and my stepmother's lawyer writing weekly letters to my solicitor, and the assize trial coming up in March. I had told myself I stayed because Aunt Augusta liked me, which was true, and because I had nowhere else to be while the law did its work, which was also true. I had not told myself I stayed because the Duke of Ardent, in the morning room at Ardent Hall, had used the phrase, "Whatever your stepmother told you is a lie," in a voice with one small crack in it. And because, for the first time in my life, a man with power had told me the truth about my own circumstances, and not been paid for it. He told me, in the gallery, about the autumn. I had not seen it from his side. I had seen only that we settled into a household. Aunt Augusta gave me a bedroom, and a maid, and a place at the table, and a project. She was rebinding a library of books that had been her own father's, and she had decided I had a hand for the work, and she set me to it. Lord Henry came down from London in October, and was charming and kind, and did not ask one question I did not wish to answer. The Duke was at home perhaps 3 days in 7. The rest of the time he was in town, or at his other estate in Northamptonshire, or at the assizes, preparing the case against Sebastian, which he was prosecuting privately at his own expense, and which he did not mention to me. He came home one evening in late October with the news that Sebastian had attempted to escape from custody and had been recaptured. He told me at dinner in 3 sentences, with no expression. I asked him whether he had been at the recapture. He said, yes. I asked him whether anyone had been hurt. He said, only Mr. Whitcomb, who broke his wrist in the fall. And he had cut his beef, and he had not looked up from his plate. And Aunt Augusta had said, in the silence, Lucian, eat. The girl is not afraid of you. He had looked up then, and our eyes had met across the table, and he had said, I beg your pardon. And I had said, please, tell me what happened. I would rather know. He had told me. He had told me carefully, without any of the softening one would use with a girl who had not seen a kitchen burn. He had told me that Sebastian had bribed a guard, that the bribe had failed, that there had been a struggle in a yard, that no one had drawn a weapon, that Sebastian had jumped from a wall and broken his wrist on landing, that the magistrate had remanded him in tighter custody and added 2 charges. He had told me it as he would have told it to his brother. I had said, thank you for telling me. He had said, I should have told you sooner. He had said it looking at me, not at the plate. I had felt the look the way I had felt his hand on my elbow in the kitchen garden. Through cloth, with no pressure, but undeniable. I had not slept that night either. Now, in the gallery, With the rain stopped and a thin sun finding its way to the floor, he said, "That was the night I knew. I came home from the assizes. I came in to dinner. Augusta had set you on my left because she had decided you would be on my left from now on. You asked me what had happened, and I looked across the table, and I saw a girl who had nearly burned to death 3 months earlier, asking me, calmly, whether I had hurt the man who set the fire. And I thought, she will not be a girl who is protected from things. She will be a woman who is told. And I thought, I love her. I thought it in the kind of plain sentence a man uses when he is past arguing with himself. I thought, I love her. I have loved her since the Reading Road. I will love her when I am 80. And I am not going to let her know, because she has had a man try to take her away in a kitchen, and I am not going to be the second man this year to make her feel she is owed. And I went on cutting my beef. He told me about the night I had come down to the library at midnight in November because I could not sleep, and had found him at the desk with a glass of brandy and a letter from the assizes open in front of him, and his head in his hand, the burned left hand, ungloved. He had not heard me come in. The library had been lit by one branch of candles. He had been sitting very still. I had stood in the doorway with my candle, and I had seen him properly for the first time, without any of the careful distance he kept on his face when he knew he was being looked at. And I had seen, plainly, that the Duke of Ardent was tired and grieving, and in some way I could not name, alone. I had said, Your Grace. He had risen at once. He had folded the letter. He had said, Forgive me. I did not know. Please, sit. Augusta sent for tea. I came down for a book, I had said. I will go up again. Stay, he had said. He had said it before he had thought about it. He had said it the way he had said stay in the carriage on the night of the fire. And there was the same note in it. A man asking for something he did not believe he was permitted to ask for. He had heard it himself. He had said, more carefully, Forgive me. Of course you may go. Or stay. The library is yours as much as mine. I will not. I had crossed the room. I had sat down in the armchair opposite his desk. I had set my candle on the desk beside his glass. I had said, Tell me about the letter. He had told me. The letter had been from the assizes. Sebastian's defense had hired a lawyer who was going to argue, in March, that the fire had been an accident, that Polly's deposition had been coerced, that I, the heiress, had set the fire myself in order to escape an unwelcome match, and that the Duke of Ardent had abducted me, a young woman of 21, from her lawful guardians, and had concealed me for 8 months at his estate against the protests of her stepmother. He had said, It is a story. It will not stand, but it is the story he is going to tell, and it will be told in print, in 3 counties, in March. I had said, And me? What does the story say of me? He had looked at me. He had said, I will not repeat what it says of you, Caroline. I will only say that I will sit in the courtroom and hear it, and not break the man's neck, because I have been told repeatedly by my solicitor that to do so would prejudice the case. It was the second time he had used my name. I had not noticed it the first time, in the carriage, when I had been only half conscious. I noticed it that night. I had said, and I do not know where the words came from, Then we should marry. He had gone very still. I do not mean, I had said, I mean the story. The story cannot stand if we are married. Whatever he tries to say of me, of you, of the 8 months, it cannot stand if I am your wife. I am not asking for, I am only, it would solve it, would it not? He had not answered for a long time. Then he had said, it would solve the story. It would not solve the question of whether you wish to be married to me, which is a question I will not put to you under threat from a man like Sebastian Whitcomb. I had said, I am putting it to you. I am asking, will you marry me? He had risen from the desk. He had walked to the window. He had stood with his back to me, the way he would 3 months later in the gallery, and I had seen his shoulders move once with a long breath. He had said, without turning, yes, if you are certain, yes. I had said, I am certain. I had said it in the bright voice of a woman making an arrangement. I had said it because I had been able to think of no other way to keep him from sitting in a courtroom in March and hearing my name made into a slur. I had said it as a transaction. He had heard me say it as a transaction. He had said yes as a transaction. He had not turned from the window because if he had turned from the window, I might have seen his face. And he would not let me see his face for a thing he had told himself he had no right to want. He had let me believe for 3 months that I had proposed an arrangement and he had accepted it, because the alternative, telling me that he had loved me since the Reading Road, that he had been carrying the brass hairpin from my hair in his coat pocket since the night of the fire, that he had been preparing for 8 months for the one chance to ask me a question he never expected the answer to, would have been to take from me, in his own house, the thing I had come into his house possessing. Choice. So this is where I will tell you what he had not told me, and what I had not let myself see. He had kept the hairpin. I had pulled it out of my hair in the kitchen garden at Briar Hollow, after he had put me in the carriage. My hair had been falling, the brass pin had been loose, and I had taken it out and put it on the seat beside me, because I had not been able to sit still while the kitchen burned and Polly was inside it. I had forgotten about the pin. I had not thought of it once after that night. He had found it in his carriage the next morning. He had not given it to a servant. He had not sent it back to Briar Hollow. He had put it in the inside pocket of the coat he wore when he travelled, and he had carried it with him to London, and to the assizes, and to the morning room where he had told me my stepmother had retired to Bath, and to the dinner table where Aunt Augusta had said, "The girl is not afraid of you," and to the library at midnight in November, where I had asked him to marry me, and to the small parlour in February, where he had said my name aloud for the first time and apologized for it. He had carried the brass hairpin in his coat for 241 days. He took it out in the gallery when he had finished telling me the story. He laid it on the small table beside my chair. It was the same pin. It was a little tarnished. The shape was a hawk's feather, narrow and curved, with 3 small notches along the spine. He said, "I have meant to give it back to you for a very long time. I have not been able to. I find I am still not able to. I am only able to lay it on the table between us and tell you that it is yours, and that it has been mine for 8 months, and that whatever you decide on Thursday, I will return it to you the moment you ask." I looked at the brass hawk feather on the table. I looked at the burned left hand ungloved. I looked at the man who had sat in a carriage in 1813 and listened to a girl sing a Welsh tune to a horse, and had not driven on, and had written a name in pencil on the back of a letter, and had kept it in a drawer for 3 years. I said, "I never loved you." He said, I know. I said, I have been so afraid of you. I have been so afraid of wanting you. I have been so afraid that if I let myself want you, you would look at me and see what you bought in a kitchen on fire. And I could not survive that. I have spent 8 months making myself a guest in your house. I made myself a guest in your house, Lucian, because I could not bear to be a wife you tolerated. It was the first time I had said his name. I did not mean to. It came out the way the brass pin had come out of my hair on the night of the fire, without permission, the way a thing comes loose when the structure that held it gives way. He said, and his voice was not steady, "Say it again." I said, "Lucian." He crossed the 2 paces between us. He did not touch me. He went down to one knee beside the chair, the burned hand braced flat against the arm, the dark hazel eyes level with mine for the first time. He said, I have loved you since the Reading Road. I have loved you in every house I have lived in for 3 years. I have loved you across a dinner table, and across a kitchen on fire, and across a desk in a library at midnight. And I have loved you in 9 days of believing you were going to walk into this gallery and tell me that you were leaving. I love you now. If you marry me on Thursday, I will spend the rest of my life telling you I love you, in plain sentences, in any room where you wish to hear it. If you do not marry me on Thursday, I will put you and your aunt and your maid and your books and your hairpin in my carriage, and I will take you to whatever house in England you choose, and I will not call upon you, and I will love you anyway. Caroline, I am asking you, what do you wish? I put my hand on his face. I had not touched him before, not once, in 8 months, except for the elbow he had taken in the kitchen garden, except for the finger of his he had laid against the back of my wrist in the library when he had given me a book in November. His scar was warm, his jaw was rough. He closed his eyes. I said, I wish to marry you on Thursday. I wish to marry you on Thursday. And I wish you to know that I lied to you 9 days ago, because I had not yet understood that a person can love someone she has not yet given herself permission to love. I wish to marry you on Thursday, and I wish never to spend another night believing you tolerate me. I wish you to put that hairpin back in my hair, and I wish you to keep it there. He opened his eyes. He said, yes. He kissed me. He kissed me the way a man kisses a woman whose face he has been carrying in his coat for 8 months, and on a road in Surrey for 3 years before that. The brass hairpin was on the table beside us. The rain had stopped. The fire had burned down to coals. I held his face in both my hands, and I felt the wet on his cheek, and I did not know which of us was crying, and I did not care. When we drew apart, he picked up the brass hawk feather from the table. He turned me gently in the chair. He gathered the loose hair at my temple, the wheat-coloured strand that had been escaping its pin since I was 18 on the Reading Road, and he slid the brass pin back into it, slowly, as if he had been practicing for a very long time. There, he said. We were married on the 14th of March, in the chapel at Ardent Hall, with Aunt Augusta in pearls in the front pew, and Lord Henry standing as the Duke's groomsman, and Polly Ainsworth, heeled and sharp-tongued, and now my own lady's maid, weeping audibly through the entire vows. The bishop spoke clearly. The Duke said "I will" in a voice that carried to the back of the chapel and into the courtyard, where the tenants are gathered in the rain. I said "I will," and meant it. Sebastian Whitcomb was tried at the spring assizes. The defence's story did not stand. Polly's deposition held. The magistrate at Bracton testified to the candle in the linen press. The Duke sat in the courtroom in a plain black coat and did not break the man's neck. I sat in the gallery on the day the verdict was returned.
Lucian sat beside me. The foreman of the jury was a corn merchant from Bracton with a heavy voice, and when he said the word guilty, I felt Lucian's hand find mine and hold. Sebastian did not look at me. He looked at the magistrate, and the magistrate looked at the page in front of him, and the page was a sentence of transportation. My stepmother was not in the courtroom. She had already left England. Sebastian was transported. My stepmother retired permanently to Bath, where she died 3 years later of a fever, and where her sister's house was sold to settle her debts, none of which fell to me.
Briar Hollow was repaired and let to a clergyman with 4 daughters on a long lease at a generous rent, and the £4,000 in the funds was settled on me alone by the marriage settlement, on the Duke's insistence, against my protest, in his small hand on the document. The lady is to retain her own fortune. This is not negotiable. Polly married the head groom in the autumn. Aunt Augusta lived another 11 years and saw both our children born, and pronounced our daughter less of a fool than the rest of you, which is high praise in this family. Lord Henry never married, and remained the most beloved uncle in 3 counties. I will tell you only one more thing. A year after the wedding, on a clear afternoon in March, the Duke and I were walking in the elm walk at Ardent Hall, the burned left hand bare, my hand inside it. I was very newly with child, though we had told no one yet. I said, "Lucian, where is the brass pin?" He said, "In your hair." I said, "Yes, but where will it be when our daughter is 18? He stopped walking. He looked at me for a long moment. He said, "In her hair, if she will have it. On a road in Surrey, if it must be. I will not be the man who keeps a thing for himself when it is asked for." I laughed. I leaned my head against his shoulder. I felt the burn-scarred hand close over mine. I had not loved him on the night of the fire. I had not loved him in the morning room, or in the carriage, or in the library at midnight. I had been too afraid to love him. He had loved me anyway. He had loved me through every minute I was afraid. He had loved me into a room where I could finally afford to put my hands down and say his name out loud. The quiet kind of love, it turns out, is the one that outlasts every rejection. It is the only kind I will ever again call by its true name.